May I now request our chief guest, Mr. Subroto Bagchi, founder of Mindtree, which helped business and societies flourish and has now emerged as India's most admired companies across the countries. He's an orator, writer, exceptional thinker, and lends a hand to causes like mental health, blindness, geriatric care, and innovation to offer the inaugural address.
Padma Shri Dr. Nam Perumal Sami, Dr. B.K. Krishnaraja Vanavarayar, President Dr. Santan Gopal, President Dr. Ajit Babu Manji, members of the organizing committee of the 76th Annual Conference of the Ophthalmological Society, ladies and gentlemen. 76 years is a long path to cover. For a professional association to come this far is a remarkable journey of purpose and solidarity. In my book, The Professional, I have spoken about the origin of the term professional. It goes back to the medieval times when it links back to the term professio, as in to profess. It meant professing allegiance to something like a religious or a monastic order. It was a vow that brought someone into the set of fellow professionals. It wasn't just a license to practice a trade or a vocation. The vow was about building an effective regard for the profession one chose. What is effective regard? In your context, it isn't enough to be a qualified doctor. It isn't enough to become successful in your subsequent life of medical practice. To be a true professional, you must build affection and regard for your order. The Ophthalmological Society gives us all the platform for doing that. In coming together every year, we honor the platform that holds us together as professionals. Soon, the society will be 100 years old, as we just learned this evening. And it is a landmark to be looked forward to, to be truly proud of. It would probably mark 3 generations of doctors serving mankind, bringing light to life. You have deeply honored me to be here as your chief guest today. Some of you know me, most of you do not. Those who know me probably think I'm here because of my work in the information technology industry, culminating in the co-founding of Mindtree that we just talked about, or maybe because I wrote a bunch of books, or maybe even because I'm one of those very few crossovers who have moved from a lifetime of work in the private sector to now join the government. Truth be told, I stand here in front of you for none of those reasons. I'm here because my mother was a blind woman. She was one more Indian who became needlessly blind, as Dr. V would have said. She had cataract in both the eyes, set early, diagnosed late, acted upon with very little means, to finally intersect with corneal ulcer, and then she became totally blind when she was just about 50 years of age. At that time, I, her youngest of 5 sons, was 12. Today, I want to talk to you about my blind mother. My father came to Odisha from Bihar in search of work. My mother came as a young bride from Bengal. My father worked all his life as a small-time state government official. My early childhood memory is mostly about moving from place to place as his transfer orders came every now and then. His work life was entirely lived in the far-flung tribal areas of the state which were inaccessible. Our homes were lit with kerosene lamps, water fetched from community wells at a distance. My mother cooked on firewood from an earthen chula. Our life was frugal. The family sat, ate, and slept on the floor. But ours was a life of contentment. It never felt poor or deprived. It was because how our parents raised us. Joy has little to do with money. I think it has a lot to do with purpose, values, and sharing. Give me those. Give me purpose, values, and sharing, and I can live with very little. Give me all the material well-being in the world, but take away purpose, values, and sharing. Nothing any longer matters. How do you create this sense of purpose, values, and sharing in a small child? As any child psychologist would tell you, it is by doing some things together along with your child in the early formative years. My earliest recollection of that doing something together was in a place called Koraput, making a small garden in front of the government house where nothing previously grew. After my father was off to his office and my elder brother to school, mother and son would go dig the ground with her kitchen utensils. Where we planted seedlings, we built a small fence to keep stray cattle away. Our first year of the effort went nowhere as white ants ate everything. Mother didn't give up. She brought ash from her chula, we treated the earth, and next year, the cosmos, the petunia, the dahlia, the rose bloomed like laughter. Seeing her garden, neighbors would often ask, why was she taking so much pain in a government house she might have to vacate in maybe a few weeks or at best a few months? She would tell them it didn't matter to her. Her job was to leave the place better than how she had inherited it. I, my mother's little elf, had that statement etched in my heart, and I have carried it for the rest of my life. Throw me into a dungeon or a desert, and I would leave the place a little better for someone who may come after me. Friends, we are designed to live for fellow beings. We are designed to care for causes beyond our temporal existence. We are designed to make things, ideas, institutions better and survive us long after we are gone. As a little boy, as mother and son dug the obstinate ground, planted the seed, cared for the saplings, weeded the garden, I didn't know that my mother saw only in a haze because her cataract had already set in. I began to understand that gradually. In places where we lived, there were no tailors, far less ladies' tailors. All the mending and sometimes the making was done by her. But we didn't have a sewing machine. It was a thing of luxury. She had a pair of scissors, needle, and threads, and with these she could make many things. But she couldn't put the thread through the needle. That was my job. When she would call me to do it, I knew it was probably because she couldn't see well. Later, as I grew older and I learned to read well, my job was to read out loud the newspaper to her every day after she had her lunch and she lay down to stretch. By now, I knew she saw things in a blur. Sitting by her, I would read out all that was going on in the big world outside us. In the process, I was raising my own consciousness of the universe that was beyond our small town existence. A few years passed, I grew up some, more transfers happened. Finally, we came to a mining district called Keonjhar. The cataract in her left eye was now mature. She was taken to the Tata Eye Hospital in Jamshedpur, and after a few weeks, she came back, now able to see clearly in one eye. A couple of years after that, the other eye was ready for operation. There was an eye camp in another small town. She went there, got operated, returned home with a bandage. Something in the meanwhile had gone seriously wrong. She bled profusely. No one knew if this had anything to do with the eye. The elders at home were speaking about corneal ulcer. I didn't know what was happening. Places like Keonjhar did not have eye doctors. I have no clear memory of what exactly happened in the weeks that followed. But a day came when a bandage was removed. She said she couldn't see anything. She was taken to the garden in the courtyard and told to take a few steps. There she walked into a bed of flowers that she had once planted. It was clear that she now could no longer see. It took her a couple of years to accept that fact, but after that, she didn't look back. She was one of the most stoic people I have ever come across in my entire life. Her resilience and stoicism probably came both from her stock and her early displacement. She lost her father as a child, who was a lawyer in Pabna in present-day Bangladesh. Her widowed mother was robbed of all her husband's land by scheming relatives who swooped down like vultures. The woman took her brood of children and walked off in search of a new life to the other side of Bengal. And that is how, driven to penury, an entire family came to start all over again. In time, a few years after her matriculation, my mother was married off. Those days, even in Bengal, women weren't encouraged to go to college. She was married off to my father, a good man with strong values, but who himself didn't know that he had a psychiatric condition. It was a difficult marriage. By the time my mother knew that there was a problem with her husband, she already had 3 children. She couldn't have gone back to her own family that had very little means. She stayed with my father for the rest of her life and stood by him. I was 10 years old when I realized that something wasn't right. My father was going through an episode. My mother took me aside. She explained to me that just that there are physical illnesses, there are mental illness. It is treatable. Your father is going through a bout of that. With treatment, he would be all right soon. Don't be afraid, she told me. A child afraid is a child broken. She was making sure I wasn't going to be afraid. That mother, who saw things in the context of her own life and could see beyond, was now completely blind. Over the years, many things happened. My mother's blindness became just another thing. She became older. The brothers settled down, went their ways. I too grew up. I went to work. I got married. Now my mother was staying with me and my wife Sushmita, who is here with us today. A day came, my father moved on. Her life was one of prayer, meditation, careful grooming, welcome everyone who came by, always asking about them, their well-being, not hers. Her warmth and engagement made it difficult for a guest to believe that she was not seeing, she was unable to see anything. She lived with grace and independence, made her own bed, cleaned her room, and even washed her clothes. I used to be always busy with my work. That is the way she had raised me. Thus, our time as mother and son together was usually after I returned home every day, and we had tea together. On one such occasion, tea was ready, but she didn't come from her room. Sushmita went in to find her non-responsive. She was taken to the hospital with stroke-like symptoms. There she remained unconscious for a few days. The doctors asked us to call the other sons, just in case. We have 5 brothers, and 4 of them, older to me, lived in other cities. 3 of them came over and kept vigil. Mother recovered and was soon discharged from the hospital. All the brothers returned to their respective places. I left for the United States on work. As soon as I arrived there in New Jersey, Sushmita called to say that my second brother, upon his return to Kolkata, had a massive heart attack and died. All of us were shocked with this turn of things. Even as we were trying to cope, the issue was whether the news should be conveyed to my mother. We decided I would do it personally, and it needed to wait till I returned to India, and until then, let her lead a normal life. A few days after I returned from the US, as was customary, I went to her room, touched her feet. She was happy I was back. I stood there without speaking. She wasn't seeing my discomfiture. Sushmita was. However strong someone may be, how do you tell a mother your child is dead? I looked at Susmita. I was tongue-tied. She gestured that the time is now, that I had to. I gathered all my composure and I broke the news to her. She heard me in total disbelief. Her sightless eyes were set on my face as if she was seeing me, searching my eyes as if for assurance that this wasn't a bad dream, that she hadn't heard me wrong. Then she looked away and sobbed. She sobbed softly. We stood there in silence, letting her grieve. After some time, she gathered herself. Then she said, "Life is a train. We are all passengers. Whoever's station arrives first, he must get off, and the train moves on with the rest of us." The mourning was over, even though the loss was going to be permanent. Over the next few months, events at my work front were changing dramatically. The business uncertainties on the horizon. I shifted base to the US for a few years. We left mother in the care of my eldest brother and relocated to the US. One day I learned she had a stroke and was hospitalized in Bhubaneswar, where my brother worked as a civil servant. I returned to find her suspended between life and death, paralyzed on one side. There was nothing that could be done medically. It was just a wait game. After being with her for a few days, I decided to get back to work. On the way to the airport, I stopped by the hospital where she lay motionless. But she was aware. There she was, and I, her last born, her baby, whom she had taught how to dig the earth, how to plant the saplings, how to make the fence, how to put thread into the needle of life, and how to recite Rabindranath Tagore. I bent down to kiss her. She asked me, why was I kissing her? Why not? I asked her. To that she said, go kiss the world. After a few months of that fabulous encounter with a blind woman of boundless vision, my mother passed away. A few years after that, we returned to India. The company I founded did well. One day I rose to be the executive chairman. Then the time came to step aside. And very coincidentally, at the same time, the government of Odisha invited me to come help with skill development for school dropouts. I came back where everything had once started for me. My assignment gave me the chance to go see the government quarter I was born in and all the small places we once grew up in. And one day I went to Koraput. I went to look for the place where mother and son had raised their first garden together. As you may imagine, I was extremely nervous. What if the house was razed? What if nothing looked familiar at all? To me, it wasn't just a return to reconstruct memories. I was looking for validation. Mother had always said, leave things in better shape than you found them. But better shape for how long? 1, 2, 10, 50 years? In my search, I needed to know if, after all, legacy is a worthwhile idea. Ladies and gentlemen, Koraput is a place where change comes slowly. It wasn't difficult for me to find the quarter we lived in. As we got down from the car, me and my entourage, willing to accept change, development, progress, destruction, and any other good reason to fell human endeavor, to my joy, I found my mother's garden. There it was, just the way she had left it long 5 decades ago, only perhaps a little better. I stood transfixed. Everything in there was telling me, after all, life is worthwhile. Life is good. Life asks you and me to engage, to give, to live, and love. Ladies and gentlemen, Subroto Bagchi, my mother, is here today in my voice, urging you to go kiss the world. She wants you to know that you, India's handful of eye doctors, are doing yeoman's service for this land of 1.3 billion people. She wants you to know that your work is not going in vain. Millions of people otherwise fated to a state of needless blindness, hence a life of destitution, are indeed grateful for your compassion and for your care. She wants you to be resilient and relentless until needless blindness is a thing of the past. Thank you very much.